Hello, welcome. You're listening to season 2 of Narcolepsy Navigators, brought to you by Naps for Life Narcolepsy. Narcolepsy Navigators is a podcast for raising awareness of this fascinating illness through a deep dive into the lives and individuals living with narcolepsy and idiopathic hypersomnia. I am Kerly Boga, the founder of Naps for Life Narcolepsy, and welcome to our stories.
Hi everyone, welcome to Narcolepsy Navigators. I'm your host for today, Liz, and I have narcolepsy and cataplexy. Kerly, who is also co-host, is unfortunately unable to join us today as she is in Kenya with limited internet access. But we have our lovely guest, Imaarl. Hi, Imaarl.
Hello. So I guess I'm Imaarl. I'm 35 from London and I have Kleine-Levin Syndrome, also known as KLS or Sleeping Beauty Syndrome.
Nice. Thank you, Imaarl. And when were you diagnosed with KLS?
I was diagnosed with KLS around 18 years old, although it did take a long time to be diagnosed because it's so rare. So around 18 years.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so you've had a diagnosis for quite a long time now.
Yeah, definitely.
What did your symptoms look like when you first started experiencing them?
Okay, so the first time I had an episode, I wasn't aware, obviously, that it was an episode, but it was New Year's Eve, 2008, roughly. And I'd just gone out for a normal New Year's Eve. Obviously, it's my first year drinking in the club, so I had a few drinks. And I remember I had a drink and I just felt really, really just out of it, spaced out. And I remember collapsing in the bathroom and just waking up thinking, like, where am I? But again, I'm just thinking that's the effects of the alcohol. The next day, I was in Liverpool at the time, and the next day I was driving home. My mum was driving us home on the motorway, and I just felt really, really spaced out and not quite knowing whether I was dreaming or awake, sort of things. That happened for several days after that incident. Even when I got home, I just could not get out of bed. And at the time, my mom and everyone around me thought that I'd been spiked. Because this happened after I'd got out, and 2 weeks later I was still in bed. So after a couple of days I thought, okay, maybe I'm sick. A week later they were like, no, something's really, really not right. This is not like her. So my mom took me to the GP, and because I was a teenager, the GP just assumed she's probably been taking drugs. This is a normal reaction. Teenager, she's probably been excessively drinking. Do you really know her, sort of thing? And my mom was like, something is not right. She's just not got out of bed. And I just felt really, really drowsy, a bit like I was under anesthetic, but I could wake up. But when I was awake, everything just felt like a dream. And after 2 weeks, I sort of just woke up out of it, and I looked at my phone, and I realized 2 weeks had passed and I'd missed college. And I was like to my mum and my sister at the time, where have I been? And that's when they explained that I'd been unwell. And that sort of happened on several occasions where I'd fall asleep for 2 weeks, and the doctors just, again, just my parents, and were just like, it's just a teenager. It's only when my mom done her own research and she randomly came up with this article. She found an article about a girl that had a similar sort of set of symptoms, and she come across Kleine-Levin Syndrome, and she brought this to the GP and was like, I think that she's got this. And that's when they confirmed, yeah, it's likely that she has Kleine-Levin Syndrome.
Wow.
So that was the first set of symptoms.
And I can't even imagine what that was like, because even though I have narcolepsy, it's obviously the symptoms are quite different from KLS. And so can you explain more about how it actually feels to go into one of those episodes?
Yeah, so as I say, that episode just felt like being really drunk at the time, but going forward, when I've had more episodes, it literally feels like the life is draining out of your body. I don't know if you've had an operation before where they put you to sleep, and that feeling of just the life just literally draining out my body. And I would just feel like the extreme tiredness that I've never experienced before, other than having this episode where I just cannot stay awake. And then when I am awake, so I would sleep for up to 23 hours a day. And the times that I am awake, when I'm woken up, it literally just feels like everything's a dream. So because I'm sleeping so much, I'm confusing reality with my dreams, and I just cannot wake up out of that state.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. That must be so disorientating.
It really is. And my episodes, they increased in time. So the first 2 episodes for 2 weeks, and then it increased to 1 month and then 2 months. And then my longest was 3 months that I was in that state for.
Oh my God. How often do they happen?
Fortunately, I haven't had an episode in many years now, about 8 years now. And my GP did say that in the research that they'd done, this will probably last for about 10 years. And I would say in the 10 years that I did experience those episodes, I had about 8 episodes. But from I'm part of a KLS group, and mine was some of the longest episodes that have been experienced. There are people that have it, they have episodes every couple of weeks, and it might be for a few days or a few weeks. But mine would seem to be for months at a time that I would be in these states.
Wow. What impact does that have on you to be in an episode like that for anywhere between 2 weeks to 3 months?
Firstly, because it's so rare, not many people believed me. That was the first thing. So when I'm trying to explain, in the beginning stages, at least, when I didn't have much information and the doctors didn't even have much information about KLS, it was kind of hard to explain. People would ask me, where have I been? And I can just say I've been sleeping. And also because I'm explaining that I'm sleeping, people just assume that a lot of people will say, oh, I'd love to sleep for that amount of time. But really, it was the psychological impact, because I've missed so much time and I'm not aware, and I'm only remembering bits of information that's happened when people remind me, remember this happened? And I'm waking up. I mean, one of the first times that it happened to me, I woke up and Barack Obama had just been elected. And I remember that was a really big thing in the newspaper, the first Black president. And I'd slept through that, and I'd woken up and all these news articles and, time had changed so much in that time. And it was really disorientating. And also I woke up with a really extreme headache. I don't know if you've ever when you oversleep. And I just felt really, really weak, lying down for that amount of time. And it was just, people not believing me and being really disorientated.
And that must be not good for your body either, because I imagine if you're going through periods of sleeping for a long amount of time, you're maybe not having regular meals or not exercising, and if you're lying down all that time, your muscles might actually be kind of wasting away to some extent.
Yeah, so I would have to have round-the-clock care, so 24-hour care. So my mum, my dad and my sister had to do shifts in looking after me, and they would have to wake me up. In the end, on the longer episodes, my mum was just having to give me smoothies. And when I did wake up out of that 3-month episode, I just felt really, really weak, just really weak. It's like learning to walk again. And I've lost a dramatic amount of weight. And again, explaining that to people, people assume that I've had an eating disorder or, I was probably depressed, and it's trying to explain the symptoms that I was experiencing. And people just laugh it off and are not really, sympathetic or understanding of what I was experiencing at that time. And also I would have severe nightmares during those episodes as well. So I'd be like a frightened child in the times that I was awake. Which on those longer episodes, I did spend some time in hospital, but the doctors would just say, we literally don't know when she's going to wake up. It's literally like being in a coma. I was literally in a coma, and the doctors or specialists just didn't know when I would wake up. And in fact, there would be there was one point when there was doctors around the country that came to view me in the bed, because I was like this rare condition, and they've never heard of that before. So they came and saw me, and, they was explaining my condition.
And so what would happen if someone did try and wake you up whilst you were in one of those episodes?
I would be extremely irritable firstly, and I just couldn't stay awake. I would literally try and do anything to sleep. I mean, the second episode that it actually happened to me, I actually went on holiday, my first, holiday to Ayia Napa. I went with my friends, and on the plane going there, I felt really, really tired, but I just assumed, it's because I'm going on holiday, I'm excited. And for some reason, I was there for 1 week. My brain just kept me awake. But throughout that whole time, I just felt like I was extremely spaced out. I just thought it was the effects of holiday. And in fact, I didn't even drink on that holiday because I just not aware of anything. And I remember the first day I went to the cash point, and I just couldn't remember how to use the cash machine. And I remember just standing there for about 10 minutes thinking, like, I'm looking at all these buttons and I cannot remember for the life of me how to use it. And that's just how it played out for the rest of the holiday. There was an incident where I was in the sea for hours. It seemed like hours, but it was probably like, like for about half an hour, just floating on the float in the sea, just again, spaced out. And when we went in the evening, we went to a club, and I just remember thinking, I just need to go home and sleep. So I followed these boys that I recognized from our hotel, and I just followed them into their hotel room and just fell asleep on their floor. Luckily, they were really safe and kind, and they made a bed for me on the floor, and they waited for my friends to find me. And then there was another occasion where I literally just left the club and I fell asleep on the floor outside a hotel. And again, a lovely boy found me, and he was like, I'm going to wait with you until your friends come. And then my friends come. But it was just very much, I would literally just fall asleep. If I needed to fall asleep, I would just fall asleep there and then. But it wasn't so much like narcolepsy where I would just fall into a sleep state. It's like it was literally like being drunk, and then you just fall asleep and you're not, you can be woken up, but when you are, you're not aware of anything.
Yeah. It's like your brain is just not switched on at all. You're kind of in a completely different mode, and you're just going through it, but not really present until you can fall asleep. And then your brain's like, this is what I wanted.
And everyone around me, because I don't look like I'm unwell, I might just look, a lot of people probably just assume that I was just drunk a lot of the time. Even when I would go out places, people just assume that I was drunk all the time. So it was battling that and not actually being aware that I'm actually unwell. But again, there's nothing, when I'm going into them states, there's nothing that can be done. I can't take medication for it. I can't be awoken. There's nothing that can wake me up out of it. I just have to wait, basically.
And the thing that strikes me from what you said about your experience on holiday as well is actually that it was putting you at risk, because you were a young woman falling asleep by yourself, very vulnerable, or making decisions that you wouldn't usually make because you weren't really, I guess your rational brain wasn't switched on at that point.
Yeah, and I think about those moments all the time, like how lucky I was that in those instances, I was met by people that were caring and, did look out for me, because it could have ended up so much worse. I'm in a completely different country. I'm only 18. I'm a young, vulnerable girl, and I've fallen asleep on the stairs of a random hotel. And that could have ended up so much worse. But thankfully, I was found by the people that I was found by, and, it was okay. But like I said, there was so many instances where I would just not be aware and just falling asleep. Yeah, anything could have happened, really.
How quickly do these episodes come on? Because you said you kind of start to feel the life draining out of you. Is it like, does it happen across a day, or is it like a few hours?
I would say it would be a day. For about a day, I would feel slightly off, that something is not quite right. But again, I can't put my finger on it. Even when I had the diagnosis, I couldn't really put a finger on it. And then with over a couple of hours, then I'm just gone in that space. In that 10-year period, I also didn't drink alcohol, because I realized that if I drank alcohol as well, that would likely trigger an episode for me. And if I did drink alcohol within half an hour, I know that I'm going to be sleeping. Yeah.
Wow. So alcohol would make you feel sleepy, but it would also then trigger an actual episode.
Yeah. So I didn't drink for 10 years. Yeah.
Gosh. Okay. That sounds interesting. I definitely want to come back to the not drinking. One thing I do want to ask you is how you actually got diagnosed with it. Are there any kind of tests that you went through, or was it just a doctor's decision, I guess?
They did. I can't remember what the test is called, where they put the stickers on my brain to see my sleep pattern. But really, truly, there wasn't really a test. It was just my mum being very persistent with the information that she had. And, from that story, she began to find other stories of people that had similar symptoms. And it was through that doctors believed, this is likely what she has. What I have. It's just my mum being very persistent. They were very, very reluctant. As I say, I was only a teenager at the time, and the doctors that I did have were very dismissive. And then I was referred to a sleep specialist in St. Thomas Hospital. That's guys in St. Thomas, and that's when they diagnosed me.
Thank God for persistent parents.
Exactly. Because many people around me just assumed that I was probably taking drugs or alcohol. I just didn't want to go to college anymore. And, many of the stereotypes that they have about teenagers, that's what was given to me. But Mom was adamant that she knew that something wasn't right and this is likely to be what it is.
And how did you feel when you got that diagnosis?
It was a relief, but it was also very scary because there was limited information or research about the condition and they didn't really have any information to give me, to be honest. They didn't say that, although one doctor did say it could last approximately 10 years, they couldn't tell me whether it was lifelong. And it seemed like everything was very bleak from what I had read. People couldn't live normal lives. People couldn't, it would interrupt large portions of your life. And it was very scary.
Wow. So you had your first episode when you were a teenager before you were diagnosed.
Yeah.
And then the second episode when you went on your first holiday, was that after you were diagnosed?
No, I think I still wasn't diagnosed. I was still going through, because the first episode happened in the January and then I went on holiday in the summertime.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so I was just about getting diagnosed. And then after that episode, that's when they said, it's likely that, because the first episode, like I said, we did just assume perhaps she's been spiked. And that episode only lasted for 2 weeks. So at the time, I thought maybe it was just a really bad flu that I had. And, my parents and my sister wasn't actually aware. At the time, they just thought that I was really unwell, recovering from a flu. Only when I woke up 2 weeks later and I was like, that was strange. I don't remember the date changing for 2 weeks. Where have I been? Like, have I been out? Has Christmas happened? I just wasn't aware. Anything.
And do you think your diagnosis dictated your kind of life decisions around that point? Because obviously being 18, that's quite a pivotal moment, deciding what you want to do for your future.
I think that when the doctor told me that about my diagnosis, ever since we've grown up, my mom's always told me like the power of the subconscious mind and, telling yourself that you're well, so you'll remain well. So I kind of had a bit of that in my mind. When the doctor was quite negative about my condition, I kind of told myself, no, I cannot live like that. I'm 18. I can't let this ruin my life. And I did go to university and I was at university. And in fact, when I was enrolling in university, I was unwell at that time in an episode. And I remember signing up for university. And again, I just felt really spaced out. And I remember my friend just talking to me and I was just like, I don't know what's going on. And I couldn't remember my way home. But I persevered and my university wasn't very supportive because, again, it was something very rare. I had very limited medical documents that I could provide to them. And I missed my second year university exams because I was sleeping, but I just carried on. And when I woke up, I just sort of carried on. I didn't want it to stop my life anyway. So I just redid the year and I ended up graduating, but I didn't drink for that large period of time for the 10 years. But yeah, I didn't want it to impact me in any way because I knew that I could have if I had just, given up at that time.
Yeah. And what got you through those really hard moments when you were at uni and you were having an episode or feeling exhausted?
Looking back, I honestly don't know how I got through it. Yeah, if I felt that I was going to be going into an episode, I don't know when I'm going to wake up. Yeah, so as I say, I didn't know when I was going to wake up. And I honestly, looking back, I don't know how I honestly got through it. I guess I kind of, because I was part of the KLS group, I kind of saw other people that were experiencing this every other week or every month. I say that I'm quite lucky that even though I had long episodes, they were spaced out in between. So I could live some sort of life in between those episodes.
Yeah. And that's another thing that I want to ask you about. And we'll come back to that one because sometimes having that community can really, have an impact in one way or another. When you were going through one of these episodes, did other people around you notice that something wasn't quite right?
I think perhaps in the early stages, I didn't really explain it well. I just probably just laughed it off a lot of the time, just say, oh, I was just sleeping. So many people just thought that you know, when I was going through the episodes, I was just sleeping. And I think, like I said before, a lot of people just assumed, a lot of the times when I'm in social settings, a lot of people just assume that I was drunk, or probably just, you know, this, you know, spaced out teenager. I was probably high all the time. And I think that that's why people didn't really recognize the symptoms. I was able to blend in. I was at university at the time. And yeah, that's why not many people recognize the symptoms. The only time that people knew that I was asleep was because at the time, that's when, you know, Instagram was becoming quite popular, Facebook. So I would update on my Facebook or my Instagram. And when I would go missing, people would just write on my wall, I hope you're awake, or, you know, and that's when people would check in on me when I would disappear off social media.
How did you manage sharing your condition with people? Is it something you were quite open about, or did you tend to keep it to yourself?
Yeah, I was very open about it. But again, I think it just went over people's heads. The time when I'm saying I've got a sleep condition, I tended to change the way I worded it. So at first I would say, oh, it's a sleep condition. Now I actually say a brain disorder, because, you know, it was so much more than just sleeping at the time. You know, missing out on large periods of life and not being able to explain what had happened to you was quite something to experience.
Yeah, I found that as well, actually, even when describing narcolepsy. If you say sleep disorder, people kind of think like, well, everyone's got issues with sleep. Yeah. Whereas if you say it's like a brain neurological thing, it gives it much more, makes it sound as serious as it is.
Exactly, yeah. A lot of people will just be like, oh, I'd love to sleep for that amount of time. Bet you're well rested. And I'm like, you wouldn't like to sleep for that long.
No, it's so annoying when people say something.
Yeah, I'm like, no, you wouldn't like to sleep. And when I came out of the episodes, I was scared to sleep. So after the episode, there would be days when I would just get no sleep because I'm literally scared to close my eyes. And it would be incidents where I would wake up and I'm just blinking constantly, like, am I really awake? Because during those episodes, I don't know whether I'm dead. There's a lot of times where I'm thinking, am I dead? Because this doesn't seem real. Everyone's around me telling me that I'm unwell, and I don't feel unwell, but they're telling me I'm unwell. So there'll be a lot of times where I'm like touching the bed or touching my face, touching the wall, and I'm like, am I really here? And I'll be scared to go to sleep. And even now, although I haven't had an episode in some time, when I do get extremely tired, it is like, hey, is this a bit more than usual, than normal tiredness, or am I going to wake up from this?
Yeah, it's almost like a trauma response, because that must be traumatic to go through that. And then your body and your mind remembers that and is like, oh my gosh, like, let's hope that's not happening again.
Exactly. Yeah. And everyone around me as well. Once I did get the diagnosis, it's like everyone around me constantly asking, are you okay? You're not going to go into an episode, are you? And it's like, no, I'm fine. It's just normal tiredness. If I even say, not so much now, but at the peak of it, when I would even say that I'm tired, everyone would panic.
Yeah. And how did your family deal with your diagnosis?
For them, it was a very stressful time because, let's say, people would have to take time off work to give me 24-hour care. It's not like I could just be placed in hospital because the hospital couldn't really do much for me. There was no medication that I could have. The doctors wouldn't know when I would wake up. So it's just very stressful time.
And did you feel like they truly understood the condition or made an effort to understand it?
Definitely. I mean, my mum, my dad were non-stop researching the condition and, trying to find other people with the similar stories. So, yeah, they really made an effort to understand.
Yeah, it makes such a difference when the people close to you really do try and understand, like, what you're going through.
Exactly. It really does. It really does. And even giving me the information once I've woken up, that was really helpful because, I say, I've gone to bed one day and I've woken up months later and I'm like, what has happened to me?
Yeah. I read online a bit about the symptoms and that it can affect cognition and behaviour. And you've also mentioned that you had quite a lot of nightmares and things. So I was wondering if you could share a bit more about the other symptoms that are involved?
Yeah, so when I would be in the sleep period for up to 23 hours a day. And when I was awake, I would become quite childlike. One of the things that I would repeatedly do is the time that I was awake, I would watch YouTube videos, but I would watch the same YouTube videos and repeat them over and over again, because that's the only thing that I can control. And I know that that's going to be something that's going to be the same every time. So just things like that, very childlike. Even when I would eat, it's just very childlike. I would keep repeatedly asking, where am I? Am I sick? What's going on? And just needing 24-hour care, really.
Yeah, wow. And did you notice or did it have an impact on your parents? Because I'm assuming they must have been worried about you, or they must worry about you when you have an episode.
Yeah, I guess they were just extremely more worried when I would go out. You know, as I say, putting myself in vulnerable situations. If I do become unwell, you know, I could just sleep anywhere. And if people around me aren't really understanding the condition, like my friends weren't aware of me being unwell when I went on holiday, potentially what could happen to me.
Yeah. And you've also mentioned that there weren't any medications that you could take. So is that still the case, that there aren't any medications out there?
Well, the doctors at the time, they suggested a few medications, but it was only a guessing game, really. So they suggested lithium was one of the medications that they suggested. So my dad has bipolar disorder, and he'd been on lithium for quite some time. So we was quite apprehensive of going on a medication when we didn't know the long-term effects of me, and two, whether we knew whether it would really have any impact on my condition. So we collectively as a family, I actually went against the medication that was offered for those reasons. Yeah, but there wasn't any medication at the time that was solely for KLS.
What does lithium do for people with KLS?
Again, they said it was just a trial. It was just a trial to see whether it would slow down the episodes or reduce the episodes.
Wow. And I imagine you don't want to be like a test dummy for these things.
Yeah. So at the time, like I said, one of the specialists said that my episodes would probably last for 10 years, but they didn't have no direct answers. Even with the medication, it was just basically trial and error, and something that they didn't have a definite answer for. I wasn't willing to be dependent on the medication and then perhaps, you know, be worried every time if I didn't take the medication. And that's what I was worried about.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so after university, where did you go, or what did you do after that?
So after university, I went into work. So I worked for a couple of years. I've always worked, and I still work now, but I worked for a couple of years, and then I got unwell again. And it was my episode that lasted for 3 years. But again, at that time, it's not a recognised condition. There's very limited information. So I couldn't claim, even though I was off work, I took sick leave, I couldn't claim any disability benefits or any sickness benefits. So that had a big financial impact on me as well, sleeping for 3 months. So yeah, that's what happened next. I went into work, but I got unwell again, and that was the episode where I fell asleep for 3 months.
Wow. And were work supportive, or did they give you any reasonable adjustments at that time?
At first, they were quite supportive. And then it was more about, well, when are you going to come back? See, I can't give them a definite answer, so I just had to leave. Yeah, I couldn't give a definite answer. It was my mom speaking on my behalf to them, and she couldn't give a definite answer of when I'm going to wake up, so I just had to resign when I did eventually wake up.
Yeah. And what was that like, having to leave your job because of your condition?
It was quite frustrating, but at the time I knew it was for the best, because I couldn't give them the answers, and I didn't want to seem like I was unreliable. And, you know, at the time I didn't know whether I was going to be awake for long periods of time. I didn't know whether it was going to be every month, be something that would really impact me and I wouldn't be able to work long term. I mean, the doctors had that kind of outlook that, you know, I wouldn't be able to work, and, you know, this would interrupt major parts of my life, and it was happening with work.
Yeah. In terms of your career, do you feel like you've had to take into account KLS, or have you just sort of chosen it and gone forward regardless of that?
Yeah, I've just always gone forward regardless of it. And I always not a lot of employers I actually told about the KLS, because as I say, in my instance, it wouldn't be all the time. I would have long episodes, but there would be periods of time, like a year in between, that I wouldn't have an episode. So sometimes I didn't feel it necessary to really explain and I always thought I would just deal with it if I get unwell. And that's what I did going forward.
And do you have any symptoms in between episodes, or is it literally just when you have the episodes?
Absolutely no symptoms. I had no symptoms. And when I would, like I said, it would be literally night and day. I would go to sleep and then wake up months later. And when I would come out of the episode, it's literally like I go to bed that night, I wake up, I blink and I'm like, I'm back. I literally wake up and I'm like, okay, I've been asleep. I look at my phone and I see the date has changed and I'm like, wow, okay, I've been asleep again.
My gosh, I can't even, really imagine what that's like. I mean, hearing you explain it, it just must be so disorientating. And do you ever get used to that feeling, or does it feel very strange each time it happens? It
feels very strange. And when I do wake up, everything feels brighter, like I'm more sensitive to everything. So the sounds feel more intense, the sky seems much brighter. Everything's just bright when I do wake up. And I never get used to that feeling.
Yeah, it's like, hello, I'm awake again.
Exactly, yes. And I literally used to shout out from my bed. I'll wake up and they'll be like, oh, she's back. Everyone will be like, she's back. Yeah.
Did you ever feel emotional in those moments?
Yeah, in the longer episodes, I would wake up and I would just cry hysterically because I'm like, not again. And because like I said, at first it was only 2 weeks at a time, and that's a long time, but it's still manageable. Most people have an virus for that length of time, but for sleeping for 2 months and 3 months, and as my episodes were increasing, it was really frightening. So when I would wake up, I would just be like, I would have an extreme headache, so I'd have to take cocodamol for that headache, and just really disorientated. I don't know the day. People have me to fill me in on birthdays, on, important events that I've missed. And and again, people just assuming that I'm lying all the time.
Yeah, that must be really difficult, trying to actually get people to understand what it's like, considering it is so rare.
Yeah, I mean, that long period, that's when, I don't know how, but the newspaper got wind of it and they wrote an article, and a lot of the comments were just that I was lying. They made a YouTube about it, and many of the people were just saying that I'm lying, I'm trying to get benefits, I'm just,
It's so frustrating.
Exactly. And it's like, I can't even claim benefits for this because I can't claim PIP, I can't, it's just,
I remember, so I got narcolepsy from the swine flu vaccine.
Oh my gosh.
Which happened to quite a lot of people, about 100 kids at the time. And it was written in a newspaper article, and there was some suggestion that there might be like a government payout at some point for some people. And I remember reading the comments under the article, and it was like, oh, people will do anything for money. They'll make up all these lies for money. It's like,
no, come on. Wow, that's so interesting. From the vaccine.
Yeah, I'm not against vaccines, though. It was just obviously an unlucky situation.
Yeah, of course. Wow, I wouldn't even correlate that to get them two together. Wow.
Do you know why you developed KLS? Is that triggered by something in particular?
No, the specialist that I was under, he suggests that perhaps I had some sort of brain virus at the time. So I was probably unwell, run down, and it went to my brain, and that's perhaps what had happened. The same specialist suggested that maybe I'd banged my head on that night that I was on the New Year's Eve that I wasn't aware about, and maybe that had triggered it. But there weren't no definite answers at the time of how they literally just said, as random as it comes, is as random as it's going to go. And that's been the case for me.
Is it a genetic thing?
Again, I literally don't know. Yeah, it's just so rare.
There's just not enough research out there.
No, not at all. I mean, there's more people. When I first got diagnosed, there was hardly anybody that I come across. And now there's like a whole community of people, and I'm hearing more and more stories of people that have been diagnosed.
What's the kind of most common or even most severe type of KLS that you hear? Is it similar to how yours presents, or is it different?
Yeah, that's how just sleeping for months at a time, long periods of time. Like I said, some people, it will happen to every couple of weeks. They go into sleep episodes. So those people, I would say, are a lot more severe than my cases because they cannot function normally. Yes, they're missing out on large periods of school or, college, university. Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh. And I would love to know more about how it impacts your social life and also your experience of being someone who didn't drink through university in those years when alcohol is a very key part of socializing.
Yeah, so as I say, it was my time during university and, in the UK, we have a big drinking culture. So during that time, a lot of people just assumed that I wasn't drinking because I was just, I just didn't want to drink. So a lot of people would try and force alcohol on me. So I remember I was going to the clubs and people were trying to pour the bottles of alcohol on me. And I'm like, I literally cannot drink. And that just didn't seem to be enough for them. I would have to come up with excuses of why I can't drink. I have to say I'm on medication or, I'm severely unwell. But people just wasn't really respectful of why I wasn't able to drink. And I still socialized. I still was invited places. Yeah, I don't think it really did impact my social life, so to speak. I just had to adapt to, not being able to drink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think KLS impacts your social life in general, or is it just when you have the episodes that come up?
I would just say when I had the episodes coming up, yeah, because I'm missing large periods of time. The first episode that I had, I actually fell out with a close friend because she didn't believe me that I was sleeping and I missed her 18th birthday party. And, she called me during the episode and I did answer the phone, but I was completely spaced out. And she was like, where are you? You're not at my birthday party. And at the time, because I was unwell, I couldn't explain why I wasn't there. And even when I woke up, she wasn't very understanding of, I've just been sleeping. To her, that wasn't a good enough excuse. So I guess in that aspect, again, people assuming that I'm lying or attention seeking. So in that aspect, yeah, it did kind of impact my social life.
And when was your last episode that you went through?
I would say about 7 years ago.
Okay, so quite a long time, like when you were in your late 20s.
Yes, yeah.
And at that time, obviously you were a little bit older then. Did you find that people had a better understanding when you talked to them about it?
No, even today when I speak to people, because it is so rare, again, people just assume that I was just sleeping and that's it, just a peaceful sleep and that's it. And again, that's part of, I guess, my kind of fault really, because I would just laugh it off because it was a lot to get over. It was quite traumatizing those months that I was sleeping. So when I woke up, I just sort of laugh it off. I didn't want to really talk about it, make a fuss. And that's just the way I brushed it off.
Yeah. And even now, do you talk openly about KLS to the people around you? Or is it something that you hold a bit kind of closer, especially if you're meeting new people or like dating, for example?
I do talk openly about it, but it's something that I'm still a bit scared to talk too much about it because I don't want it to ever happen again. And I know, as I say, I'm part of the KLS group and there's people that haven't had episodes in 10 years and then have had episodes. So I'm still aware that it's such a rare condition, it could still happen. And that's what still scares me, even though I haven't had an episode for a long time. I've still got this diagnosis and it still could happen.
Yeah. And do you think it impacts your mental health?
I think so, yeah, because like I said, it's just always having that anxiety of this could happen. No one's going to believe me. I don't even know how to articulate it. I'm having dreams. And the dreams, when I say I'm having dreams, they're really, really vivid. So I'm dreaming of dead people that have passed away, friends that have passed away. And in my mind, I'm really seeing them in the dreams. And, everything just seems so real to me that I can't differentiate between reality and what's a dream. And that has an impact, definitely.
Yeah, I can imagine that it's always in the back of your mind, like this could happen again.
Yeah. Whenever I get a little bit more tired than usual, I'm like, okay, when I wake up in the morning, I'm doing that blinking thing again, and I'm like, okay, it's just tiredness. Okay, I can breathe.
Yeah, just thanking your lucky stars that you woke up and you're feeling present.
Yeah, exactly. And even when because as I say, I didn't drink for 10 years. And even after 10 years, and I did drink, I only, like my mum and everyone around me was saying, you're so stupid. Why would you do that? You can bring on an episode. And I guess I only drank for that first time because I didn't kind of want to have it hanging over me. Like I had always had it in the back of my mind that the doctor, the specialist did say 10 years. It'd been 10 years now. And I just kind of wanted to test it. Silly as it sounds, I wanted to kind of test it out to see whether I did still have KLS. I mean, I always have it, but I didn't sleep after that time, but it was still like just to test it out because it's this anxiety that I always still have.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's like you had that number in your head, and then when you got to the end, you were like, okay, it might be gone now. I just want to really test that out and hope for the best.
Yeah, and there was loads of times throughout my teenage years where I would test out alcohol. And, I'm only young, and, that was having that willpower to be, a teenager, my first time clubbing and all of that, and trying not to drink. And then, people are egging you on. And there would be times when I would actually say, okay, just a sip. And that would be me finished for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And that was quite difficult because, again, then that's like a self-inflicted thing. Then I've become unwell and it's self-inflicted and it's my own fault that time. And then that will have because it's shameful and it's, you feel so much guilt because you've had a part to play and now you've been unwell.
That's so hard because when you're a teenager, drinking alcohol for a lot of people, for most of us, is like it's kind of like a rite of passage or
it is
something that you want to experience. And also at that age, you're surrounded by people who are drinking, and it's really hard to say no to that, but then to know that would then put you into an episode, that must have been really tricky to like still be kind to yourself in those moments.
Exactly, and that was only like I would say about twice that happened. I felt that shame and that that embarrassment that people saw me drinking and they're gonna know that this is why I'm sleeping. But it was just having that willpower that I really had to stick to because I didn't want to ruin my life. I didn't want to miss so many important events.
Yeah. Can you talk a bit about the stigma around KLS, if there is one?
Yeah, I would say the stigma is that people just assuming that I'm lying. In the early stages, people just assumed that I was high or I was just dependent on drugs and alcohol, that I was just trying to stay off college, and ultimately that I was just lying and making it up for attention. And I think that's a big stigma around it. And that is just a sleep condition, that you're just sleeping. So it's like, it's no harm. It's not going to have a mental impact on her. She's literally just sleeping. And that's a big stigma.
And that's the case with so many sleep conditions, I think. People, it's like the butt of the joke.
Yeah, and actually it's very traumatic for people that have sleep conditions. You literally miss so much of life, and it's so exhausting to have. Literally, it's so exhausting. Even when you're not having an episode, just the thought that you could possibly have an episode is exhausting.
What do you think needs to be done to tackle the stigma and raise awareness about KLS?
I think one of the things is that I don't really think that it should be referred to as a sleep disorder as such. More a neurological disorder or brain disorder, that should be the focus. Because, as I say, when you mention a sleep disorder, people are not really understanding, very, very dismissive. And some of the other symptoms should be focused on as well. So it's not just sleep, it's the nightmares, the childlike behaviours, you're disorientated, and some of those symptoms should be focused on.
And you've talked a little bit about being part of the KLS community.
Yeah.
How did you get involved with them, and what impact has that had for you?
Don't know how I managed to get involved with them. I think they might have reached out to my mum, and they were really, really, it was really amazing to see that other people were, amazing, maybe the wrong word, but it was really interesting to see that there was other people that were experiencing the same as me, because I felt so isolated when it first happened to me. And just getting updates, even though I haven't had an episode in a long time, it's really nice to see updates on research that has taken place or study groups that are taking place. And that's been really helpful for me. And even I've been able to, in the KLS group, I've been able to share my success story. You know, I've gone to university and, you know, I haven't had episodes for some time now, and I've gone on to do to live a pretty normal life, which wasn't very, very hopeful for me in the beginning when I was first diagnosed. So just being able to share updates in the KLS group has been really nice.
Yeah. And is there much research out there about KLS?
I think they're doing a lot. There is a lot more research now. It's still limited, but there is a lot more. And KLS are really working on pushing out research regarding Klein-Levin. There is a specialist in Guy's and St. Thomas's that I worked with that, they're constantly asking for updates and
Oh, nice. That's great. We need more research in all these areas, but specifically KLS, it sounds like it's such a rare and under-recognized condition.
Yeah, and I guess I need to do some more research myself to see whether there had been any updates with medication. I know from what I read in the KLS group, there still talks about lithium and quite similar medication that was suggested to me, but there wasn't it was still kind of a trial medication and it wasn't a cure. I know that there hasn't been any, there's still people from what I'm aware, there's nobody that has a medication that stops the episodes at all. So there hasn't been much progress in medication.
Not yet. Fingers crossed for all you guys.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
And do you know if there are any other triggers apart from alcohol for you or for people in general who have KLS?
Well, from my understanding, it could be stress, it could be alcohol, substances, a virus if you become unwell. These are just the triggers that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's a few different things, but I guess sometimes it's hard to pinpoint exactly what triggered it.
Again, with KLS, it's literally just like a guessing game. Like throughout my time whenever I'd be in hospital, it was literally just a guessing game. Well, we think it could be this, possibly this, but ultimately we just don't know. And that's the reaction that I had for many years when I was in hospital with KLS.
What is that like to never really have clear answers on either why you have the condition or why it was triggered in that occasion?
It was just frustrating, really. And it just played on the anxiety that, you know, you just don't know when this is going to happen. You don't know how long for. There's literally no cure for it. It's not like you can go into hospital and, you know, you can have an injection or you can have something. There's just nothing for it. So it just played on the anxiety, really. I always say that I'm so grateful that I haven't had an episode for a long time. And I always joke saying I literally wouldn't have survived it. I probably would be very suicidal had this continued and had I had more episodes, because it's just not something that you can live with long term. And every time I log into the KLS group and I see people are in their episodes, and I'm just like, I literally don't know how I would cope or how I'd still be here today. And I always joke about it, but ultimately I'm being serious. I just don't know how I would survive if I still had this condition. Yeah,
it sounds like it's a really hard thing to go through, especially when it's on a regular basis.
Yeah, definitely.
How do you manage the anxiety day to day, thinking that you could have an episode and not knowing the causes or the triggers of that?
I literally just try and put it out of the back of my mind. I try not to think about it until somebody brings it up to me. I try not to think about it. As I say, I read an article a few weeks ago where a man has said that he hadn't had an episode. There was actually two people who said they hadn't had an episode in 10 years and then they had an episode, and that I couldn't sleep for a couple of days after that, because it's just the thought of, I thought that I'm literally free of this, but actually I still have this diagnosis, and you know, there are not many answers that have been given to me, and it could happen at any time.
Yeah. And so does the likelihood decrease of having an episode if you haven't had one for X amount of years, around 10 years, did you say?
Yes. Yeah, that's what I was told by the specialist. But again, it's a guessing game. A guessing game.
Yeah.
And they told me that due to my age, it's unlikely that I will have further episodes. But again, in the KLS group, there are people that are older than me that are still experiencing symptoms. So I can never be too sure.
Yeah. It's like facing the unknown, which can be really difficult sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, not have an episode after 10 years and then fall asleep for weeks or months at a time would literally, I literally don't know what I would do if that happens again. Yeah.
And what do you think the future holds for you in terms of, is having your own family something you think about within the context of managing KLS as well? Or are you kind of focusing on your career, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I would like to have my own family. I guess I haven't really thought about how KLS would impact that because, again, childbirth is a traumatic, it can be a very traumatic experience on the body. It's very strenuous on the body. So I don't know whether that would trigger further episodes or how that would impact my body. I haven't really thought about that, but it is something that I would like to do in the future. And I guess when that time comes, I would just deal with, that when it comes. Yeah.
So your approach is more like pursue the things you want to do and just deal with it if it happens in the moment.
Yeah. I mean, it would be terrible if I, had a child, and how would I manage? Because I would literally need 24-hour care and I wouldn't be able to look after a child during those episodes if it was to happen.
Is that something that you kind of think about in detail, or is it, or like plan for? I know that's because it's like a future thing. It's sometimes.
It hasn't been something that I've really thought about in detail, only when when I read that article about the two people that didn't have an episode for 10 years. And then I was like, wow, like if this happened now, that I don't know how I'd navigate that. And it did cross my mind, but it's not something I've really thought about. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. Because you're kind of thinking like, I haven't had it for this long, and the likelihood of having another episode is very much reduced now.
Yeah, but again, like I said, it came on randomly, and the specialist believed that I had a virus at the time, and, I could get a virus again, and that's why even during the pandemic, I had been reluctant to get the vaccine only because of the virus aspect, getting a virus, because they had told me that I've had a brain disorder. And when I explained this to my work at the time, so my manager at the time, she had not been quite understanding, and that's the only time again where I had to further explain, I had this condition, and that's why I'm reluctant. But yeah, the question of the vaccine was quite tricky as well to navigate with KLS.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah.
So a question I usually ask at the end of the episode is, if you could press a red button and completely get rid of KLS and never have experienced it, would you do it, and why?
100%. 100%. I mean, you just want to have perfect health, and, to have something that interrupts your life so much and interrupts your mental health, your social life, everything, and nobody really understands what's happening and why, and you have no answers. It's, it can really change and impact your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'd be pressing that red button pretty quickly.
Definitely. And I kind of feel guilty as well because, as I say, I haven't had an episode for so long, but I haven't really spoken much out about it. But it's literally due to fear of, it happening again. And perhaps I think in the future, I would like to speak more about it and raise awareness, because for now, I feel like a lot of people just dismiss it as this sleep disorder, and it's not really serious, like a lot of sleep disorders are, just dismissed.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure our listeners will be very grateful to you sharing your story, because it's not something that people know that much about. And for the people that have KLS and they listen to this, I'm sure they'll be happy to hear someone advocating for them.
So. Even now, it's still quite hard to explain what I experienced during that time.
Yeah, I imagine, because it's such an intense experience from the sounds of it. And so to explain that in a way that people understand, it must be difficult. But you've done a great job of that today.
And a lot of the episodes I'm having to recall from what people have told me during that time as well, and then piece things together, kind of like if you've experienced being drunk, when you've been drunk and then someone says, do you remember when you've done that? And then I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, piecing back what has been reality and what's been a dream.
Yeah. Yeah, we all know that feeling.
Yeah.
Yes, more extreme for KLS, but the drunk one I can relate to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything that you think you have gained from KLS?
Anything? I think the only thing, I guess, having willpower. I know that I can, I have the willpower to say no now, which wasn't so easy in the beginning, but if something's not right for me, then it's not right. And I'm able to I have a lot more, I guess, drive, because I know that this could have ended up so much worse for me. And I've seen what I've been able to do. I mean, I've gone through university with this condition, so I guess I don't really have much excuse otherwise.
Yeah, you've definitely shown that you can get through the hard times, for sure.
Exactly, yeah. And I guess just believing that, this can't be long term and I can do things, when a lot of people around me were quite negative about what I was capable of. So I guess I've been able to really show my strength in that I am capable regardless of the diagnosis.
Yeah, and having that faith in yourself as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Imaarl, for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's so important to raise awareness of these things, and you've done it in such a lovely and clear way and really explained it for people who don't understand it or don't know about it. And for people that have KLS, yeah, they will love to hear someone sharing that and advocating for them.
Oh, I hope so.
So at the end of the episode, we like to get people to say happy napping, everyone, as a little tagline. So after 3, 1, 2, 3, happy napping, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Views and opinions in these stories may not work for everyone. If anything you have heard is relatable, please see a doctor for advice. Thank you for spending time here with us at Narcolepsy Navigators. I hope you learned something new. Please share the podcast with others. You can find us on all platforms. See you next time when we delve into another person's story.